was that if I had taken a sort of a narrowly sectional avant-garde approach, I would have been blocked off from influencing me much more. And I think Pasolini, who would be the great Italian avant-gardist of the 20th century, and probably the great European avant-gardist of the 20th century, not debate, but certainly the greatest Italian one. And the Italian avant-garde of the 60s and 70s is hugely admirable, because not only are they continuously creative across a whole range of forms and collaborations, Pasolini himself being a filmmaker, a poet, a critic, all those sorts of things, formally innovative, politically, I mean, dangerous. You know, I mean, half of them were assassinated, right? And making work that was read by millions. So, I mean, I would love to see an avant-garde whose ambition was, and that's what I really like about what you were talking about earlier on, that you taught about how can we go from having nobody in the room, okay, because it's not a problem with the work, it's a problem with, you know, we haven't taught enough, as if we want to call ourselves an avant-garde, we haven't taught enough about how we actually want to speak to people, how we're going to get them to listen.
Yeah.
And I think one of the criticisms Pasolini made of the sort of ultra-left avant-garde in the 70s, which was aligned with the terrorist movement at the time this happened, but still had a mass following, was that, you know, they proclaimed that one of the things we're never going to do, we're never going to read Yeats, right? We're never going to read Joe. We're never going to read anybody who's sort of a big figure because they're all oppressing us, right? And it's like shooting yourself in the head as a writer. You know, you might as well shoot in your head a bit. It's a moralizing activity. So I'm a full believer in the canon and the necessity of the canon and all that sort of thing. We can argue about what should be in it and all that, but certainly a full believer in it. I wonder, what is the ambition? You've done a really good job of building a little bit of a bigger audience. How can we go and make a really big one? You know, what can we use?
Pretty huge things you said there, my friend.
The only question is, how do we get more people to engage with us?
Well, two big questions and things I would say really quickly. The problematic avant-garde in the UK that is related to Mr. Print, but not Mr. Print himself, because I found him in 2002, but definitely connected to his reputation, which he knows about, has done nothing to defeat, I would suggest, is that any sort of political action like the Red Brigade or the bottom right half that had like avant-garde maybe isn't the way forward. I think the reason why that had cachet is because Pasolini was, you know, people eating poop and talking about
the argument against it.
You know, it's the right time and place. We can't. I honestly feel, without being defeated, you can't change that. You're in the time or the place.
Sure.
You either have the platform or you don't have the platform. The only way to do it now would be, and it has crossed my mind, to do something deliberately incredibly controversial, like Pussy Riot, where I worked with them when they came to London. I did events for them. Their work is kind of crap, you know, but their political standpoint is incredible. I don't mean crap in the sense that it's not valuable, it's immensely valuable, but actually when you speak to them, they don't even really think about the work. There's a political agency which has work behind it. And that's what I kind of think we need to stay away from. I think maybe this discussion is about getting away from the complacency of the avant-garde, which is kind of like a disease in my background, in the British. You know, he did this, he stopped me from doing that, I'll never get awarded for a prize, etc., etc., which is just a useless conversation when there's lots of food to be eaten on the table. And realising also our limitations. I take great pleasure, I think I said in Cork, when I introduced, I was really disappointed to see so many people because it made me think people actually cared. I took a great pride in this maybe as like a little subsidised, weird little group of people going about. I don't really care if people read my work too much. I don't really care if I'm successful in that way. Because if you start writing experimental poetry and you do care about that, you are mental. So
isn't it a great experiment to communicate with an audience these days?
I love the opportunities I've got. I don't mean to sound flippant. I seek them out, but in a way, because I don't care about them, I'm free to do things that other people give me a lot of use for in the UK, which is being maybe careerist or, you know, like networking. I do those things, and it's because I don't care really if they work or not, or if I'm seen as professional, this or that. Because I grew up, in terms of poetry, in the writers' schoolroom, upstairs in a pub in London, with old men saying, I never got my due, I was never allowed. And I just remember kind of looking at them, you know, I'm a fully grown man, thinking, this man just like, a guy just walked into the room for the forum and you looked at him like he was a piece of shit. And then I'm imagining back to like the 70s when you met a Faber editor and you were like, hello sir, how are you? You know, can I send you what you were like, you're a fucking piece of shit. I wonder why they didn't publish you, you know, you were suppressed, man, you know, so I just made it a huge goal in my life to be a really nice human being whose work is really, you know, truthful, I suppose. Because I was just saying to Christodoulos the other day, and I'll shut up now, I'm sorry I've gone on. I know a lot of the invitations I get to do things are not about my work. They're about people's perceived, maybe apolitical because if they read my work, they would never invite me.
Sure.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
At the Poetry Parnassus with Christodoulos Makris, I was giving out my book, and there was like these communities of people who were like literary agents from different countries, and this lady came up, she's from the Israeli Literature Fund. It'd be great to have you since I gave her a book. On the front cover is a mock-up artist's work from Finland of a gay Nazi on the front cover. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even connect in my mind. I was like, there's my new book. And I sat down, but I'm networking. I didn't hear from the lady. So I love that disconnect. That's fruitful because we can actually, like, what I'm doing, I think, is new. I'm not working in anyone's path because I've got the internet. Like half the people I know who are here tonight working connected with it's on the internet. It didn't exist. It's changed the entire conception of perception and writing. It's in language. It's there. We're checking our phones every 2 minutes. People moan about this. It's the future. You're not going to get away from it. You might as well enjoy it. And that's what I'm interested in. Doing something that's not overturning or engaged. I push all that crap behind. Do something new. So the idea of political things and like, I just don't even think about that. Just
Well, that wasn't really my point.
No, I understand that thing, but just a reference. Yeah. So.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Selima Hill, I think she's a very good avant-garde English poet. And she doesn't engage, and she's not political, and she is transgressing in a way because that's her choice. And I like what you say about Deja. I use Deja a lot. That's my publisher there, Kit. And so, I kind of tend to like to work that way. But if you're talking about collaborating and going out and finding poetry, and you think of someone like Selima Hill, and she's been going for a hell of a long time. So what do you think of that? And she's female.
I don't think in England she's really considered that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
She's considered quite mainstream, I think.
Yeah.
But, not in a bad way. As I said, my tastes are wide-ranging, but I don't know. Like, I suppose in the avant-garde it also includes the art world and like sound art and, like people putting on the stage like Fowler put their bum. I mean, that's one end of it. So I'm not sure Selina Hill's on that radar,
As regards poetry though, I think she's doing something that's very out there.
Yeah, I'd have to read more of her work to be able to answer that question. I wouldn't want to speak on someone whose work I've never read.
I like Selina Hill's work. Just to go back to talking about the avant-garde, I wasted a lot of my time, I wasted most of my 20s trying to work out what the avant-garde was in Britain mainly, trying to work out what the British avant-garde was. What I discovered towards the end of that decade that I wasted was that it was a gang. And it was done by association. So the people who I thought were writing work, it was a bit like Selina Hill, for example. You wouldn't really call it mainstream exactly in the Larkin-esque sense, but you wouldn't call it avant-garde in a really out there sense either. People like that sometimes were included among the avant-garde, sometimes they were, oh no, mainstream wouldn't have them, near me. And it was all done, it was all guilt and approval by association, and there I was, a little nerd, because I didn't have a background in this sort of area. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I didn't have a literary background. I didn't, I grew up in a very happy household with plenty of books and kind of encouraged, but I didn't have that sort of kind of Hampstead middle class background that might get you into these kind of. Nobody was there to advise me. I wasted years and years trying to work out what it was about the work that made A, avant-garde and B, mainstream. I mean, I could see the difference between Tom Rayworth and Philip Larkin, but there was this whole middle ground that I was just trying to work out. And then I worked out, they were playground gangs. And I get quite cross about that in some ways, because I wasted a lot of my time when I could have been, going out there and...
Because I kind of don't like labels, and when you say, talk about experimental poetry, I'm shocked to think about experimental poetry, because I don't actually sit down and watch write a poem about food, which I don't. I spend a lot of time on. Steve, get you up later. But, so I'm just kind of thinking, is the transgression of not transgressing by not being part of the establishment and not being a formalist, is that in itself putting a label and it's still some sort of gang. It's not really as fluid as you imagine it is.
Well, I think at the end of the day, to answer that super quickly, even if you resisted labels, they exist because we exist in space that people use definitions. So you can only get away so much. The thing that maybe builds off Kit's point and the answer to today's very kind question is that we're in a moment where we can change all that nonsense and do things like this, where you're touring around, being hunting poets, inviting loads of different people, having a big chat, having loads of different readings, and not excluding people just because they're not your mate, inviting people and actually asking them to be part of it, and maybe making a joke out of things in the past. People would chew their lip over for an hour as an imagined insight.
Yeah, because a lot of Irish poetry is kind of controlled by beards and saggy scrotums and corduroy jackets. So that's why I tend to prefer the internet. I find it more fluid, and I find that you can actually get in touch with English poets, Australian poets, American poets, and I find you can actually get a lot more done than going out there and networking and speaking to these people, as Kit was saying, and wasting time, basically, trying to understand what's my label.
But this is the space we're talking about, where different things come in, different
collide.
Collision. You're talking about, we'll have the whole world, as Steve was saying there, the internet has changed everything, and you have people writing in a certain way in Australia, writing in a certain way in Russia, and so on. We can also do that with poetic schools, poetic gangs. Why not? Why, just because we kind of write in a slightly different way, why should we not come together and see what we can, why not even collaborate? If we think we're completely different, what if we come together and see what comes out? See how we respond to somebody else's way of writing, and what can we do with it? Can we break it down? Can they break us down? There's that collision, there's that enmity as well. Going back to the name of this project, where we find common ground where we collide, and when we then come away from it, we take something from the outside.
Yeah, the question, if the internet is that amazing, right? It's a question for a kid, Susan. Just if it's that fucking amazing, why do you still produce printed books?
I don't think it's mutually exclusive.
No, I actually, it's a genuine question. I'm not trying to be that's not smart aleck. Like, actually, I really want to know why is the commitment to print still there, and why?
Print isn't going to go anywhere.
Because some people enjoy to have a codex in their hands still, and you can actually get books on Kindle, but I prefer to read it.
I was actually asking her, but
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I think the two can run parallel quite nicely. I think the internet is great at bringing people together, and I just think books are a different product. Print.
And there's also a space between the two as
Yeah.
well. One can influence in terms of process, the other, as a space where the work can go out. So the internet process, working for the internet, can be transferred into print. But that's the innovation. How do we do that? And vice versa. How do we do that? Do we publish on PDF on the internet? Why? We can just as well print. It's the same format.
Postage is so expensive. Posting books around the world.
Yeah.
So expensive. It's atrociously expensive. And producing books is so expensive and so wasteful. And I do it myself all the time. But why do we still do it? I mean, we don't need it.
I think we do in a sense. I think we still haven't quite got, maybe it's something we need to do, but I think we haven't quite got used to, we're getting there, but we haven't quite got used to reading on electronic devices yet. And I think there's still an appetite for printed books, and I think there's still a need for some of the material culture around books. I really want to do stuff with newsprint, but newsprint is so expensive to produce, in comparison to print on demand publishing and things like that. I really want to do stuff with newsprint, and I've got this kind of got great yen for newsprint. But if I haven't bought a newspaper, I think in about 7 years, but I still want the material feel of newsprint. I want to read some poems in newsprint. So I think there's a desire, there's a material culture thing there that we can do. Perhaps the way the print will go is towards I have not luxury exactly, but towards productions which are more geared towards that material culture, towards actually making something concrete, making some concrete poetry out of the print medium, actually using print medium artistically. So I'd like to see it go that way as kind of e-readers get better.
Or scrolls, if you go back to like Egyptian times, and have scrolls. I mean,
I forget about.
Well, these ones they just scroll, isn't it? It's different per page.
I think that's my next book.
You can scroll all the way down. Forever.
Also, the NSA and GCHQ spying on us and logging all of our internet poems, so if we keep them in books, then they don't own our work. It's another thing to think about.
And batteries run out, like books don't have batteries.
Yeah, it's a good technology that way. Good battery.
Bobby.
I think we've time for one more.
A book is a work of art as well as an object, as well as a method of putting your work out there. Nobody's mentioned that yet.
Good question. Phrase it as a question.
I think I did actually.
I think we keep just.
I think I actually did.
You can buy my books on the table over there, my friend.
Okay, I'd just like to thank everyone for listening patiently. We're going to take a short break and then there's going to be some really excellent collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you.